Hello everyone, welcome back to another mechanical review. Today we're going to be doing actually a mechanical tier list, where we'll be ranking hidden mechanics within stories or games. So to be more specific, I won't be ranking how strong or powerful some mechanics are, but specifically the ways in which those hidden mechanics and those small details are creative or fun in the overall story, or just how much I like them. And today we're actually going to be ranking the flying Rajin technique. It's a jutsu from Naruto, which is mainly used by Minato. So if you haven't seen Naruto, go watch it or stop watching. Okay, let's start. The first is tracking. So by tracking, I mean the way in which the flying Rajin can be put on someone else's body, and in that way you can always keep track of where they are at any time, and always move towards them. It is such an OP mechanic to use because essentially Minato can always keep track of his disciples and also all his enemies. It doesn't matter how far you are, it can always get to you, which is terrifying but also really good. Moreover, this works as tracking not just for people but also for like transportation. So you can get from one village to another like in almost immediately. It is like the ultimate way to move around and to get to people. It is almost perfect and I see no real drawback. So for that, I'll put it in an S. The second is domain control. So if you remember, one thing that Minato used to do to like control the battlefield is put a bunch of kunais almost everywhere on the field. That way, he was always able to get to any specific point during a battle. So he can, for example, get behind the enemies or get next to them or just move away from them in any specific way. And I think that's maybe one drawback from tracking is that you're only able to actually get to your opponent depending on where the mark is. However, with domain control, he can actually get from essentially any point he wants because the kunais are basically everywhere. This is really good mainly for battle because this way, he controls the battlefields in any way he wants. And I think it's mainly this way he was able to use this technique that allowed him to be the biggest menace in the war. However, there are drawbacks. Mainly that domain control only works if you're able to get your kunais all across the field. If you can't, then you can't do it. So it's very like setup heavy. And also, if he uses kunais, the opponent could easily just like you move them around whichever way they want. So it's not perfect, I would say. But it's pretty good. So for that, I'll put an A. Okay, the next is moving objects with you. So this one's a bit complicated, mainly because I don't get it myself. The thing is that like, once someone is able to move from mark to mark, they can clearly move things with them. For example, their clothes or their weapons, which obviously begs the question, how much can you actually move with you? For example, could you move a massive object with you? It is pretty hard to tell, but for the sake of it, let's imagine both extremes. So the worst option is you can't move things. You can only move things like on you. For example, your clothes or whatever's already on your body. This isn't that bad also, mainly because if you have like weapons on you, you can move them with you. However, you're limited to how much you can carry. Now, the best possible option, I would say, is you can move other massive things with you. Which, if true, is great, because if that's possible, the user could move along massive objects or beings with them. Quote-unquote worst option, because we do actually see Minato move around with objects that are on his body. However, we never see him move big things with him, and if he could, he probably would, right? For that reason, I think that the way in which you move things is not as creatively damaging as you might think it is. Because, I mean, yeah, you could use Flying Rajin to move things around, but there is summoning, right? So what's the point? However, I do think that in conjuncture with other attacks, it could be useful. So for that, I'll put it in A. The next is other dimensions. So okay, essentially when I was researching this subject, the idea is that during the Flying Rajin, when you move from place to place, you are moved from one dimension and then pop out wherever you want to be. Kind of like a wormhole, I guess. Which obviously begs the question, what is this other dimension and what can you do with it? If it were possible to keep certain objects within the other dimension, that would be extremely useful because you essentially create your own pocket prison. But again, if that were possible, they would do it, right? Which they don't, so I don't think you can do that. The main way I think the dimension works is as a wormhole to make you move across it. Not to be used as a gas station. Unless I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. But for now, I think it's best to just think you can't. So I'll put it in C for now. The next one is actually kind of complex. It is the multiple teleportation technique. So essentially, the reason why Minato was so dangerous is because he was actually able to make the technique his own and move by himself, which in canon seems to be an actually really hard thing to do, because many others need to use the technique with other people to make it work. Like the jutsu is a group effort, and we see this when 3 Jonin, I think the Jonin, are actually able to use the technique, but with each other. But far more fascinatingly, they're able to use it to move people around. So they become the teleporter, and someone who doesn't know how to use it can be moved around from place to place. I think this harpens back to moving objects with you, but it's more realized here, because here you can essentially move anyone you want from any position you want. It is obviously great for like security, but it can be great for battle, where you can like move your friends or opponents somewhere else. And of course, could you move multiple people at once? Like what's the max here? Is it 1 or like 100? Let's say for example, like 100 ninjas were all able to use the moving conjecture to teleport something massive. What happens then? Could they move another massive person or object? Or would they be able to actually move something even bigger, like a building or a village even? This does obviously have some drawbacks. So for example, you do need at least 3 people to make it work. So if one dies, for example, it's over. And moreover, I'm pretty sure that you actually need to mark where you want to go in advance. I'm not sure if it's actually just one person who marks it or like all 3 of them mark it. So yeah, potentially it is a really strong move, as it allows people to pass around people and objects more easily. But it seems like the setup is really arduous. So for that, I'll put it in B. Okay, this one is kind of interesting. Use between users. So we've seen that in the anime, when one user makes a mark and uses it, someone else can then use that mark if they know the jutsu. Now this is actually really cool, and I think it is cool for several reasons. The first is transportation, because let's say you have a friend who can use the technique. That friend can then use their marks as tracks that you can use to follow them around, kind of making like a subway you can all use. But moreover, this is really good when it comes to combat, because for example, imagine someone using domain control and there are like 2 or 3 people who can use the technique. They can then move around freely to attack the opponent. It's just a very useful move, but the only way it's usable is if you know someone else who knows how to use it. And in canon, that's only 2 people, so not many. But for potential alone, I'll put it in S. Okay. The next is instant travel, which I think is a subcategory in tracking. Being able to move around at almost instant speed is just broken, because this allows the user to accomplish a lot more compared to another ninja. It just makes them a far more useful asset. It allows them to accomplish a lot more in a day compared to someone else. So yes, learning this technique is time consuming. However, when you do, your productivity and what you can do just increase exponentially. Additionally, for combat, it is very useful because it allows you to move faster than your opponent can think. In other words, blitz them. So I think for that alone, I'll put it in S. The next is active after death. So in the final arc, we learn that once a mark is put down, it never goes away, like ever. We see this when Minato uses a mark he made on Obito 16 years ago. This is a really fun mechanic to have, but when is this ever useful? For the most part, when you die in Naruto, you never come back unless someone brings you back, which is very rare. So yes, it is cool that marks stay after your death, but once you die, there's no use for you having them anyway. However, it is useful for other people. Remember, with other users, they can use your mark. So if someone dies, other alive users can use the marks you left behind. If many other people could use technique, then after 100 years, you would have marks everywhere that anyone can use. So it's useful for others, but not you. So for that, I'll put it in B. It's just average. I think that's kind of cheating, because it is essentially the idea of using multiple mechanics together all at once. So the way in which tracking works with instant travel and domain control and moving things around. Because at its core, when you put them all together, this jutsu is just one of the most broken jutsus in the whole series. You can move instantly from anywhere you want if someone else left a mark for you, you can use it. If there are enough kunais around, you can essentially control the battlefield. And once you go up against an opponent, you can move so fast they can't even keep track of you. Moreover, you can move yourself, but you can also move others with you if you have enough people who can use the jutsu with you. So you can move people or objects, or perhaps even bigger things. It is just too good, I think. So for that reason, I'll actually put an S. But anyways, yeah, that's the end of the video. If you like it, let me know. And if you have thoughts, let me know in the comments. I'll see you next time. Peace.